to be with yourself, and your sexuality's likely changed throughout this time. And so like not just moms, but like all parents are dealing with this. And then in that space of being a single mom, it's just you. That makes, yeah. And so
it's real. So, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
And so what was I gonna say? I mean, yes, partnered or not, you're gonna go through this. Partnered or not, you can go through this. And partnered or not, you can get through this. You can get to a place where you get back to yourself. You get back to your sexual self. You know. So, and some people don't have this issue at all. I know with my first kid, I had sex all the way up until the day my child was born. And then, you're supposed to wait like, 6 to 11 weeks after, especially if you had a C-section, before you have sex again. We didn't wait that long. And so you'll see that's why a lot of people have babies back to back, because you're hella fertile during that time. You're still open, and you'll go right back into pregnancy all over again, because, your partner is like hecka hot for you, because you just gave me this wonderful baby. I just love you so much. It creates this cycle. So everybody don't necessarily go through this, but what is clear, and what every woman has talked to me about, is that feeling of not feeling as sexy after giving birth.
Yeah.
So that's a universal mom thing, and so, like I said, some people work through it and get through it, and some people, this lasts for a long time,
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. That's spot on. So talk about, and you touched on this a little bit, but like why having a healthy sex life is important. Like what does that make available?
It makes so many things available. So just being an orgasmic woman, period, brings flush to the face, brings energy, sweet energy to the rest of your body. It's a healing modality. Sex and orgasms is a healing modality, right? And so it can relieve stress, it can relieve pain, it can, just unlock unnecessary lack of worthiness feelings in a person. Like, it just can do so much. And so when you're a mom, you're very tired, you working, you're being a mom, you cleaning, you cooking and cleaning. It's such a wheel turning of constant, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this for other people. Right? You're constantly observant. And so there has to be some point where there's some service for you. And so sex is one of those ways that you can have service for yourself.
Yes.
Either someone's taking care of you in that way, or you're taking care of yourself.
That's spot on. Like, I'm really hearing you have the opportunity to rejuvenate yourself, like healing is available. Hormones, I think about like dopamine and serotonin, and just like the way that the body goes through its own evolution, that it actually is energizing, and it brings you back, and it allows for like the relief of tension. You talked about pain. I can hear all these different things, and I'm like, yeah, everybody needs that. And I know we also talked about like the spiritual aspects of sexuality, and like you touched on healing. So like, this is more than just physical. Can you share a little bit more about the work around that?
Yeah, so spiritually, what happens to a human being, like after they've given birth, like they've had this touch and go with God. And so it took sex to produce life. And then it takes sex to sustain life. It's an ebb and flow that is moving with the universal force of life itself, of all of creation. So that cycle has to keep going, even though after you produce life. And then there's women who don't ever even have kids. They need to keep that energy, cycle of creation in their lives. This keeps the spirit vibrating at a high level to have optimal performance in the human reality, right? When sex is part of your life, you smile more, you emanate love and loving feeling. People come into your stratosphere and they're hit by that love vibration, that glow that is around you. This gives a person a way to see the actual higher self being aura that comes with the spirit body, because the flesh is just a host. The spirit of the person lives in this area right here. That higher self is this outside of this physical flesh body. But to activate that spirit body, you have to activate the flesh. You understand? It goes together. And so the universal force is in alignment with the human body, right? So you have day and night, you have expansion and contraction. The same with the uterus and the genitals, they expand and contract. We're in one accord. We're not disconnected from the universal force. We are the universal force.
Yeah.
And so the disparities that I see in humans who have cut sex off, these people tend to be highly depressive, they're manic depressive, they're drug addicts, alcoholics, because their spirit body is trying to get that ebb and flow. They're using other things to get it because they cut sex off. Or they're food addicts. I mean, I've seen all these different things in way sexuality translate to addiction because they're not getting that touch. We are a touch-deprived society. And when we lived in tribal life, there's a lot more touching going on. You're sitting right next to your sister. You're sitting right next to your baby. You're sitting right next to your cousin. Y'all sitting next to each other. Skin is touching. Thighs are touching. Arms are touching. You know, and then I'm holding your baby. You holding my baby. I'm hugging you. I'm doing your hair. I'm making your food. I'm drawing your bath. That's tribal life. We were close. We touched. In this society, we are deprived. We're so separated. We're not living in tribal relationships. And so this is causing a separation of the universal community mindset and construct that allows us to be touching with each other. We are missing that in this reality. So unfortunately, sex is one of the only ways left that people are actually still touching each other. And so to not have that at all, and then not have the other parts, like you really doing a disservice to your spirit body.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, you touched on everything in there, and I love what you were creating about, like the uterus and the universe. Like those two things are very synonymous and they're vast, the idea of ebbing and flowing and also being in your creative space. Thank you for tying that into addiction, depression, mental health. When you cut off creativity, that's what tends to happen as you end up with some of the more base levels of existence. Some of the natures can be very destructive. Some of the natures can be very hostile. And sex is creation. Just the way that you would create anything else, sex is creative energy. So like allowing that to flow through you, it can reduce a lot of the tension that you're speaking to. That's incredible. Thank you. So I do want to talk about some of the reasons. Like you talked a little bit about some of the reasons why moms might not be involved sexually, and you like some of the stuff you talked about previously was in relation to trauma. And I would like to spend a little time, looking at just that conversation for people who are dealing with trauma and, really protecting themselves and their families from experiences. Just some of the things that are available there.
Yeah. So, so we go right back to where we started in the beginning. Sexual oppression can start very early on. If you came from a very religious family, if you were sexually assaulted or you were molested, like these things follow you into adulthood a lot of times. If you didn't do any work to like really work on that, it will follow you into adulthood, and you may get into relationships and then fall out of those relationships. A kid can come as a result of those relationships, but you stay in a sexually repressed state. I've seen that in a lot of cases, and then they just be like, I just give up on sex. I'm like, just it never worked out for me. It never really feels good for me. It's always triggering what happened to me before. I'm just done with it. I've seen that happen.
Yeah. And people ultimately removing the option and the opportunity. And so it's like you may be in relationships where sex is involved or available, but it may not necessarily be an enjoyable or healthy experience. Let's see. Yeah. This is great. So talk about some ways that moms can re-engage or stay engaged with their sexuality.
Re-engaging. So what I like to invite women to do is like really go on a self-love journey. And when you go on a self-love journey, it's a lot about finding what you like about your body. Like it's easy to talk about what you don't like about your body. Like I don't like my butt, and I don't like my ass, I don't like this, I don't like that. And so I start with having a person really get engaged with whatever it is on their body they like. Like, oh, I like my smile, or I like my eyes. And I invite the person to really start to move around the body, even if it's the arm or their nail beds or the way their toes are shaped, like moving up to the legs, up to the thighs, up to the belly, like really starting to fall in love with the body. I start there. And then one of the other things that I do to engage is like, I really incorporate sex magic work, like really uses sex as magic to reform and heal the body. And it's all of what I want to put in the mind of the person. So I'm like, okay, well, this time when you have like self-pleasuring time, like I want you to talk to yourself the way you would want your lover to talk to you. What words would you want them to say? And this has really been impactful, because if you are engaging with yourself sexually and you say the words like, I love you, right? This is it creates a vibration in the body. Women have told me they've had like multiple orgasms just by saying that I love you while they're masturbating, right? And so those are just some ways to like start the engagement. And then there's things that you could just do on a regular basis to like be sexually fluid all the time. And so I always start with taking photos of yourself. You should have a sexy photo shoot at some point, either in lingerie or nude, in the sunlight, in the moonlight, like just getting into a sexy mind state for yourself. Like all this work is not for the pleasure of anyone else. This is all for your own pleasure. And keeping like I said, keeping a piece of sexy lingerie, just having it in the cuts, like pulling it out from time to time and putting it on after your bath, with your glass of wine, with your joint, with your whatever. Like when the kids finally went to bed, like turn your room into a womb with red lighting or pink lighting, with really soft bedding. Like these are things that generate sexual energy in your own private room.
Whew.
This is something to try.
Yes. Okay. That was a little bit intimate. I'm like, yes, like telling myself that I love you during that's very powerful. Got me a little flustered over here.
It's
And,
it's transformative. It was transformative for me to try that, because I've totally had moments where I'm just like, I'm not attracted to anyone. No one ever asked